Welcome, my name is Spike, and this is my introduction into miniatures. This is a brand new hobby for me. I've never played a miniatures game before in my life. In fact, I used to be completely averse to miniatures games. I hated minis. I'm a board gamer, and I was one of those board gamers that hated it when miniatures filled the game boxes. Because it just jacked up the prices for no reason, just adding stupid little plastic minis into the game when you just put wooden miniatures and drop the price. That was my attitude. Until one day, when I decided to start painting some of my miniatures in my games. My favorite game is Merchants and Marauders, and yes, I'm aware of the downtime between turns, but it's still my favorite game. And I wanted the ships to look real as they sailed across the board. But I had no idea how to paint them, so I decided I would learn. I didn't want my first minis I painted to be my ships. I didn't want to touch those until I knew what I was doing. So I had some Christmas money and bought some paints. And first started by painting my Flashpoint Fire Rescue guys. They turned out okay. But it wasn't the quality. It was just the moment that brush touched the miniature, I was hooked. I was hooked. I loved everything about painting minis. And I went on YouTube to find out more. And you can learn a lot. There's so much out there for learning how to paint minis on YouTube. And in my opinion, video is the best way to learn because you can get up close and personal with that miniature. Right? Instead of, if you're doing it in person, painting and having to shove it in someone's face, it's right there, super close up the whole time while you're painting it. So video is an amazing way to learn how to do that. And there's tons of stuff out there. But as soon as I started painting, I wanted to paint more. I moved on and painted my Spectre Ops guys and gals. And I wanted more. And then I realized that there's an entire hobby dedicated to this. Where you buy minis, you paint them, and you play with them. So, alright, I caved. And I said, this sounds very interesting. But where do I begin? The goal of this video is to document my progress into this hobby, which I know nothing about. Because I live over an hour drive away on the highway from any store that sells this stuff. Right? The closest tabletop store is over an hour away. And to be honest, those stores are intimidating. Right? You enter into the store, the first thing you see are these huge dioramas of amazing terrain, these armies, and these people speaking in this foreign language, this tabletop language that you know nothing about, and you don't know where to begin. And sometimes it's frightening just to ask. And the price point is high. I mean, maybe for someone who's already into miniatures at $200 that you're going to sit down right away into a game, it's no big deal. You know you're going to enjoy it. You know you're going to spend hours doing it. It's worth the money to you. For someone who's brand new to it, that price point is scary. And it's no different than getting into board games. I have board games in my collection that are $90, $100 Canadian. And to people who don't play board games, they look at that and they're like, that's ridiculous. I'm never going to pay that. But for someone who plays board games, you realize $90, yeah, I'll get my money's worth out of that. And so it's just part of being into the hobby more. But where do I begin? So I want to help people who are in my situation. They don't know where to go. They don't know anybody who does it. I don't know anybody that does it. And how do I get into it? So I'm going to kind of document my progress in getting into this game. But the first question is, where do you begin? Is it all just Warhammer? That's what I thought. And I hate the theme of Warhammer. I have no interest in it. At least not yet. Maybe once I get into the hobby more, I will. I mean, I had no interest in playing Euro games until I got into gaming, and now I love them. So it could just be a matter of that. But I don't want to start with it. That's a big footprint. That's a lot of army. That's an army. And it's a lot of work. It's really, really frightening. It's really scary. And I'm not interested in army tactics, at least not now. I like characters and story and stuff like that. Hence why I'm the board gaming bard, and I've done videos about the stories and written stories about board games. That's what I like. I like characters and stuff like that. Not interested in the army. If only there was a smaller version of this wargaming hobby. Oh, I found out there was. Skirmish games, apparently they're called. And you can enter into this hobby at a much cheaper price because you're buying small factions. It's only like, half a dozen people. And you play with that instead of armies. And that was much more interesting and also much easier to get into. You don't have to worry about painting an army and then figuring out how to do army tactics. You just have to worry about painting half a dozen people or characters or monsters or whatever it is, and then learn how to play the game that way on a smaller footprint. That sounds much more manageable and a lot less daunting. So I thought, hey, I'm going to start there. But again, where do you start there? Found out that there's a lot of skirmish games. Which one do I start with? And what do I need to start? So I went on forums and asked, and did research on what do I need to start in the specific games. And people were very helpful. They tried their best. They really did. But there's something lost in translation, right? When you're involved in a hobby for so long and so in depth, that the terms that you think everyone should probably know, people don't. Just that you use the terms so often. Right? My wife and I do this all the time. Right? When we're talking about when we get home from work. I used to be an air traffic controller. And so when I try to describe my day to my wife in the simplest terms that's not ATC related, at least I don't think they are, turns out they are. And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And vice versa. My wife's an architect. And so she'll explain to me what's going on at work and stuff in these, what she thinks are the simplest construction terms. Sometimes I'll just nod my head because I don't want to look stupid. But often I'll have to tell her, I don't know what you're talking about. What does that word mean? So something gets lost in translation. People who are really trying to help, they weren't being that helpful. You need this master totem, and that's all you need. Great. Okay, what are those things? But I found out that a lot of these skirmish games, you can download the rules for free. What an amazing place to start. Because what do they tell you in the first couple pages? What you need to start. That's fantastic. All right. And some of them you can just buy starter sets as well. They'll give you what you need, everything you need to start. Starter set. Some of them don't. All right. So, but again, the rules will tell you. So if the game doesn't allow you to print the rules for free, as someone who's just starting out, I would probably hesitate on maybe choosing that game. That's what I did. All right. I weeded things out. Okay, can I download your rules? No? Okay. Putting them to the side. Maybe I'll give them to you when I get into the hobby a little bit later. So I looked at the games that I could download the rules for. And I kind of narrow things down to like half a dozen games. All right, then which one of these looked more interesting? Which ones are more expensive and cheaper? And try to manage things that way. And I came up with a few pretty good ones. It all depends on your theme that you like, the style of game that you want to play. And my tastes are probably very different than a lot of yours. But when I did choose, is because the price point was the best bang for your buck for me, living in Canada. And also, it had a really interesting theme. It's gothic, steampunk, horror, fantasy, Victorian mash all together. And very interesting. And the price point was really good. I can get into it, everything I needed, for $100 Canadian. That's pretty good. I bought board games for that, right? That's pretty good. The one I chose was Malifaux. And it's actually one of the most popular ones out there, so it'll probably be easier to find other people who play it. This, though, does not come with a starter set, which is what put me off for a while. I actually got mad. I just wanted to buy a starter set so I can get into it. All right? This one didn't have a starter set. I'm like, I had to figure out what I need to buy, and it was just too much work. Again, download the rules. They tell you what you need to start. It wasn't much, right? I'm doing this by myself. I don't know anyone else who wants to get into the hobby as well. So if you have two of you who want to get into it together, hey, you can split costs up. Right? But for me, I gotta do both because I gotta lure people in. So I bought two factions. I just gotta make sure that they're two different factions. Each there's different core boxes within each faction. Just make sure you buy two different factions so they can play against each other. And a deck of cards for each. A deck of cards for each, and that's it. That was it. And you can just use a regular deck of cards from the dollar store. It's like $1, maybe $2 if you want to get fancy. And that's it. I just paid a little bit more for my cards, between $5 and $10 for each deck, just because I wanted some nice cards to go with it. But you can also go on their website and buy Malifaux cards. They have their own suits. I also give you some a little more information on the cards, because what the cards do. But I didn't like the way they looked. We're on the 3rd edition now. They just came out with the 3rd edition last year, in 2019. So this is actually a great time to get into it, because they're just unleashing this new edition. There's going to be a lot of new stuff, new revamping. It's kind of an exciting time to get into it right now because of that. I didn't like the cards. The 2nd edition cards were amazing. I looked everywhere on the internet to try and find where I could buy the 2nd edition cards, because they looked like playing cards they would have played with in this universe. But I couldn't find them. So I just bought my own cards, because I didn't like it. In my opinion, the cards for the 3rd edition just looked like a fancy new component for a fancy new edition. There was no character to them. But you don't need them. Go to the dollar store and buy 2 decks of cards, or 1 deck of cards if you're just doing one faction. And that's it. That's it. Like they even say, tokens, you can just use whatever you want for tokens. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make my own tokens. I like making stuff, which is why I like getting into this hobby, because I found out that you build the terrain. So I'm going to get into that too. Figure it out. And this is where I started. I bought a Fast Core box and the Karis Core box. And I'm going to cut them out, because they all just come in pieces. Cut all the pieces out, glue them together, paint them, and I'm going to go through all that. I'm going to shoot some videos of me going through that and probably screwing it all up as I enter into this new hobby and figure this all out. But I'm excited. I'm happy with this decision. It was $100 just to get into it for both. If you're splitting this up between the two of you, it's $50 Canadian. That's really good to get into. And I'm probably, well, depending if I end up loving it, I'm going to see if I'm going to venture off into other games and maybe document those as well, or maybe I'll just venture off into what more that this offers as well. I don't know yet. We'll see. We'll see where it goes. We'll see where I'm going to go and what exciting trails we're going to go down. But for now, I'm going to explore this. I'm going to show you how it works, how I'm going to get into it, and just the basics of what miniature gaming is, and hopefully I don't botch it up. And if I make mistakes on rules or on how things are going, if anything I say is not true, put in the comments, correct me, please. I'm learning, trying to figure this out. So let's see what this game is all about. So now we've got everything cut out and assembled. It's time to put them on the board. And how do we do that? Well, here I have a very basic little terrain setup. I used this XPS foam to cut out a 3x3 foot grid, or not grid, but a playing surface, because each game is played on 3x3, but my desk wasn't 3 feet wide for filming down here, so I just cut this out of XPS foam just to give me a 3x3 space to play on. But I mean, tape on a table would be fine, is all you really need. And during all this filming, from the first intro to building Cornelius to this part of me playing here, COVID-19 kind of exploded. So there's probably a month or more between filming of all this video. And kids have been home, my wife's working from home, I've been working sporadically. So getting filming time had been difficult, but I've been able to get into the my studio to do some painting and actually learning how to build some stuff sporadically. But to get down here with the lights, get lights and camera set up to tape has just been difficult. So there's some extra stuff on the table that I've been able to do, which has actually been great, because I've been able to learn more about what this game is all about, what this hobby's about, more about painting minis, about building stuff. So hopefully I can give you a little bit more info as we continue on. This has been a blast, though. I've actually enjoyed building stuff a lot more than I thought I would. But how does this game work? That's the whole purpose of this video series. Trying to figure out if this is something that we're all going to be interested in, and how do we get involved. So this is what you need to start playing the game. You just need a 3x3 square to play on and some terrain. Now, I've had time to build some stuff, but you don't need it. Right? If I didn't have time to do that, I would have gotten into it anyway. by using books, blocks of wood, cups, mugs, whatever it is you have, just to put some terrain on the board. They say you fill up about 2/3 of the terrain of your board with terrain, and use whatever you have. You just need some obstacles, people to go around and stuff like that. And of course, your decks of cards that you'll need. Most wargaming and miniatures games, actually, I think maybe all of them except for Malifaux, everything's resolved with dice, except for this one's with cards. So instead of defense and attack dice, it's defense and attack cards, and for rolling for initiative, it's flipping for initiative. So it's the same general idea as just rolling dice, except you're flipping cards, with some little extra rules in there as well. But, and I forgot to mention, you'll also need tokens. But the rules say you can use whatever you want. They give you the dimensions that they need to be, so just make sure they're the right dimensions for your tokens, and you're good to go. I've been making my own. If you want, I think the Weird website might sell tokens. I'm not sure. But if you go to Etsy, there's some really cool tokens that you can buy for a pretty good price. They're really, really neat. Made out of good plastic. But I really enjoy making stuff, so I'm making my own tokens. I use my drill to cut out some circles out of wood. I'm gonna put some foam on it, paint some symbols and stuff. I'm in the process of doing that right now, because it's part of the game, it's part of the fun. So what really got me excited about miniatures games is the idea of how immersive that it could really be. It's not just about moving your character 6 spaces, and then, okay, if he's 6 spaces away from this thing, he can do this, or whatever. You're very restricted by the squares and the hexes that you're moving on. But here you're not. Right? If I want to go to this spot right there, I can go to that spot. Right? There's no line to say I can't follow the grid with moving spaces. If I want to go to the corner of this building or around to this side, I can do that by moving my pieces, because it's all about distance. Right? How far can this character move? So if this character's over here, he wants to move 5. Let's say he can move 5. I just measure 5 spaces and move him to 5 spaces. I thought that this would make this so much more exciting, and it does. I haven't played a full game of this yet. I'm still, it's still essentially locked down, right, with COVID-19. Don't really want to go see other people or invite people over at the moment. So I haven't been able to get anyone over, so I might lure my wife to come play with me here shortly. But I've sat down and I've gone through the rules. Like I do with every board game anyway. I always sit and play the game out by myself before I teach it to anybody. And so I've done that with this. This took a lot longer than I expected. There is a lot of information to get through, and it's a lot different than a board game. I figured it'd just be like a board game with different movement styles and different people, but it's a very, very different experience. It took me a couple hours by myself trying to figure out, okay, how does this game work? Because again, you have all of your tokens, but also your terrain gets into it. I mean, you have your buildings and how you can move, but you have your buildings that are in the way, right? And so you have also rules, because the buildings will cast shadows, which will affect your concealment, but also there's different types of terrain that you can go through or can't, or that also affect how people see you and what you can do, and plus the iconography on the cards, and also all the different terminologies. It was just such a steep learning curve. But I got through it, and I'm not going to give a in-depth tutorial on the rules of the game, although I might do a video on that later. We'll see. But right now, I just kind of give an idea of what these games are about. Is this something we're going to be interested in? Is it worth the money that I paid and the time and effort I've been putting into it? So far, yes. Just building the buildings and painting the minis, it's been worth the money. It's been worth the time and the investment. It's been a blast. I've been having fun. It's been giving me something to do during this COVID-19, social distancing. So been home a lot, been able to, to do this. So that's been quite nice. So how does the game work? What's the game about? So each wargaming apparently has different types of strategies that you can do, different types of games. So, and Malifaux has a couple different ones as well within it. You can do just wipe out the other person or specific objectives. So you have these tokens that you have to go and flip over to your side, or away from the opponent's side. Whoever has the most gets points. There's actually quite a bit of different schemes and strategies that you can do within the game, and same rules of the moving and the line of sight. I always found interesting, and getting into it and learning how to play it, I really like the line of sight idea. This makes it much more immersive, but also much more evocative, because you're actually trying to put yourself in that person's head. Okay, can I see the fire starter over there? Right? Can he actually see him? You're using your line of sight. Is he obstructed? Is he obstructed by shadow or the terrain that's there? And it's not just the characters, but also the board and the terrain itself becomes a character in this story, in this game. Because you have to look at each individual piece of terrain and how that terrain is going to affect it, just like you would if you were playing this outside or in real life. Can I see that person? What's that building doing? It actually makes it quite exciting, and I actually can't wait to play this with somebody else. So let's take a look at a person and what their abilities are. So this guy here, he's a frontiersman. Right, so on each card, right, you have your abilities, this is typical over all the games, right? So you have your defense, your weapons, your movements, and your size. All right, your size is 2, and you measure, and you can compare that to the sizes of buildings, for example. So this building here, right, is 3 inches tall. He is 2. He's size 2, so that's 1 higher than 2, and that plays into the rules. But if someone's up higher than you, and they can have a better chance of seeing you and stuff like that. So even just standing on top of terrain and the heights, and it's very much a 3-dimensional game, which it's just very exciting. But also you have your movement 5, so that's 5 inches. Right? It's pretty straightforward. Your weapon is 5. Now, I don't know why I keep saying weapon. It is not weapon, it's willpower. I've read the rules several times, and each time it very clearly states that it is willpower, but for some reason, I just can't get weapon out of my head. It has nothing to do with weapons. The weapons for the characters are on the back of the card. All the stats and info for the weapons are on the back. This is willpower. So your strength of will to overcome something. So if, let's say a character has a special ability or power, you need to test your strength of will against that character to see if you're able to attack. So if you pass your willpower check, then you can attack, that type of stuff. It is not weapon. Ignore everything I'm saying. It's willpower. Now, let's continue. And also your defense. So your defense rolls, flipping of the cards, you add 5 to it. That's pretty straightforward. Then you have your different abilities. Each character has their different abilities, and then they're also specific actions. So on your turn, you can move, you can interact with something, you can attack somebody, and you have your different attack actions. Each character has this different attack action, which is one of the big learning curves, was because I was trying to play both factions at once against each other, and so just going through, okay, what can each person do? All right, I need a marker for a dust cloud, I need a marker for a pyre marker, I need a marker for this, but I didn't have any markers out yet. And so I had to go, and then I had to go start building my markers for the game. I've actually started building a little dust cloud, right? Because some of these characters they leave dust clouds out there, and I'm trying to build little dust clouds for thematic purposes. And I'm going to document my progress onto making all these little things. This one didn't turn out very well. I'm going to redo it. And then for the cards, again, like I said, just like dice rolling, right? So you're flipping, and this person flips, and you compare your numbers. I don't know how I feel about the cards instead of the dice yet, because again, I haven't really played it through, but it's interesting enough. And then plus you'll have your own hand of cards, of 6 cards that you can cheat with, which again, I'm not going to get into the depths of the rules, but you can use a card from your hand and place it and use that instead of what you flipped, with some restricted rules on how to do that. You can cheat. But then the other person can also cheat as well. So that's interesting. So let's take a look at a typical turn. We're going to use these two characters. We have the fire starter over here, and we have the frontiersman over here. Their objective, what they're trying to do, is get to this token. Right now, this token is neutral, and one's trying to flip it in their favor, the other one's trying to put it into their favor. This is one of the strategies within the game. There's actually 5 on the board, one in the center, one in each of the quadrants, and each person's trying to go out. Each team's trying to go out and flip them into their advantage, and get points for flipping the most. So that's their goal, is trying to do this. So start with fire starter, right? So according to his stats, he can move 7. So that's easy enough. He can move up to 7. Doesn't have to move exactly 7. Up to 7. All right, and so that's, well, it's only 5 away from him. So he can move right up and touches next to it. That's one action. You can do 2 actions on your turn. For most of them, there are some rules, but if you're the leader, it's 3 actions. But I'm not going to get into exhaustive tutorial of the rules. But typically, unless it's the leader, it's 2 actions. So second action could be to interact with it. And to interact with it, he's going to put it into his favor. Well, he succeeded in that. And those are his 2 actions. So now we have the frontiersman over here. He's going to decide to move. His movement is 5. All right, so let's see. You can move 5 over to here. Now, if he wants to fight, because he's going to want to, he's going to want to get over there. He can move twice if he wants to move another 5 to the marker. But I'm thinking he wants to get the guy out of the way. So if he wants, he could do his tomahawk, but his tomahawk can only go an inch away. So that won't work. But he has a clockwork revolver, which is good up to 12 inches. So he's good. And so the stat is 5, which adds 5 to his flip. And so this is where this comes in. They're going to do a flip. He flips his. King of diamonds, 8 of hearts. Now these translate to the different suits in the game. And they all numerical. So Jack would actually be 11, King 12, King 13. But so King plus 5. And then the fire starter has a defense of 5. So 8 plus 5. So obviously frontiersman wins and hits him, and he loses the appropriate health that would say on the cards. Now there's also where the suits play into it, is that if the fire starter was fighting the frontiersman and attacking him, on his card it says a flame wall. So if he flipped his attack card and it was actually a heart, like it should be, or ram, as it is in the game, rams are hearts. If he had a specific burning condition, he would then create a pyre marker on the board. Right? And then so the different effects happen based on the suits that you flip as you resolve all these actions and resolve all these fightings. And that's how the game continues on like that. Each character is specifically different, which is what I like about these skirmish games over the war tactics games. All in all, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to building more terrain. I think I'm going to go with some more Victorian style terrain. Been doing some research on it, and but these were fun little things to start with. Just threw this together with some cardboard. This was like a paper towel roll, just to get some practice in. But you know what? This has been fun. I'm really, really looking forward to getting into this more, and I really hope that you'll follow along on my progress on how I can get into this game. I'm going to also film some games that I play. So when I finally convince my wife to come play this game with me, I plan on filming it and documenting that. And the more I learn, the more I'll tape and the more I'll show you. And well, I hope you're as excited as I am to figure out what this hobby is all about.